Hey guys, welcome back to another Why No One Plays. Today's episode will be going over a champion who is widely acclaimed for his diverse moveset and performance in the jungle at a time when very few could do what he did at the same level of efficiency. However, like most other What Happened to champions, his presence has been diminishing gradually over the years, and while you still see him every now and then, it's a far cry from how ubiquitous he was back in the day. So let's find out what happened to Gragas, the rabble-rouser. Though before we get on with the video, today's sponsor is Skillshare, which arguably needs no introduction. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for anyone who loves to learn and wants to explore their creativity and learn new skills. If you ever consider picking up a new hobby like photography, digital art, graphic design, and so on, you can find classes that match your goals and interests. It can be something small like learning how to solve the Rubik's Cube or something to point you in a new career direction. The entire platform is ad-free, so you won't experience any interruptions, and the entire catalog is now available with subtitles in Spanish, French, Portuguese, and German. If you feel like adding some more spice to your day-to-day life, why not pick a course to try out? The first 1,000 people to use the link on screen will get a 1-month free trial. You can also find it in the description below. Thanks again to Skillshare for sponsoring the video, but for now, let's get back to it. Prior to Season 9 onwards, Gragas was one of the best junglers of all time. He was a regular staple in pro play and consistently held a 15 to 20% pick rate in solo queue, albeit with no shortage of volatility, going from non-existent to pick ban what appears to be every half a year or so. As one of the few holdouts of the AP bruiser subclass, Gragas benefited from a lot of circumstances. During the tank meta spanning seasons 5 through 7, he was used very frequently for his strong engage potential, extremely good disruption, and above average damage even when going full tank. He also did just enough damage to cover your AP slot if your mid laner wanted to use a physical damage dealer like Yasuo or Zed. Speaking of which, he was capable of going either AP or tank, giving players more reason to invest time on him rather than other tanks. That and he was a lot of fun to play, especially considering the time period he was released in, where a lot of champions had linear one-dimensional playstyles. Stuff like barrel roll, body slam, and explosive casts presented a lot of interesting and dynamic ways to start trouble, true to his background and title as a rabble-rouser. Of course, the future wasn't so kind to him. As more and more intricate and complex champions came about, competition began to rise. The jungle's barrier to entry was made less strict, and reworks to existing champions allowed them to do just as much, if not more than what he could. So basically, the natural progression of League is what eventually led to his descent from relevance. A very big reason why Gragas was omnipresent before 2018 was because he was one of the few champions in the game who was actually viable as a jungler. In fact, conceptually speaking, he may have been the best jungler in the game. He had decent clear speed and high sustain, allowing him to full clear while still having enough left over to go for ganks, and he was pretty good at ganking. Since then, the jungle has been made much less threatening to the point where just about every jungle champion can full clear and still have max health. So with Gragas' main strength no longer being unique only to him, that distinction wasn't able to mask his weak points anymore. It's not that he's weak or a bad champion, it's just that what he has is not as special as it used to be. If we were to compare him to modern standards, Gragas is average in just about everything. His clear speed used to be highly respected on account of having 2 AoE attacks, body slam and barrel roll. At the time, Drunken Rage didn't have the splash damage. Over time, new junglers were added, and existing ones were reworked to have better clear speed. In terms of new junglers, we have the likes of Rek'Sai, Kayn, Echo, Lilia, Viego, and Ivern, and in terms of reworks, we have Nunu, Fiddlesticks, Xinjiao, Graves, Volibear, so on and so forth. This, in conjunction with monster camps having less health, effectively renders Gragas' one solid clear to be middling. As for his ganking, it was also kind of average. Other junglers like Shaco, Kha'Zix, Rek'Sai, Lee Sin, and Jarvan, to name a few, have far better gap closers and damage output. But what kept them from outshining Gragas was once again their poor first clear. All of those junglers would have to recall to heal up, whereas Gragas didn't, thus allowing him to strike first on the map. Additionally, his combat pressure was a lot weaker. Gragas would often lose in 1v1s or skirmishes due to having long cooldowns in the early game. But again, he wasn't concerned with getting counter-jungled in light of jungle camps hurting a lot more back then compared to now. Essentially, all of his weaknesses were covered up by circumstance. He had average clear speed, but that wasn't an issue because everyone else had to waste time recalling. His ganks were decent, but not the best, though that wasn't an issue because he always had the first move. He was vulnerable to invades, but that wasn't an issue since everyone else would get beaten up by camps in their first clear. Fast forward to now, everyone full clears under 3 minutes and is full HP and mana to boot. Gragas now has to face more competition than ever before, especially since, for some reason, Riot has been trying to widen the jungle roster by giving everyone bonus damage to monsters. That's the main cause of its declining popularity. There are just more options now, but that alone shouldn't have diminished his presence to such an extent. After all, we still have someone like Ezreal routinely holding double-digit pick rate even with the advent of new marksmen and AP bot laners crashing the party. So what else is there? Gragas is one of League's original balance nightmares. Normally when the term balance nightmare is brought up, it usually implies extreme hypercarry champions with a plethora of bells and whistles up their sleeve. Azir, Ryze, Irelia, Akali, and so on. Though he doesn't have the flashiest plays in a traditional sense, Gragas' balancing issue stems from his core properties. His greatest weapons are his neutral game and disruption, two things that should ideally never be put together. It's mostly why you see him playing in top lane these days as opposed to jungle back then. If both or even one parameter is strong, that has a knock-on effect on the other, hence why even a slight buff in either field causes him to skyrocket in popularity. To keep him from being a problem, both elements are made intentionally weak, resulting in Gragas being a jack of all trades, master of none. So how does he have a good neutral game? Two abilities, Barrel Roll and Happy Hour. Barrel Roll is a mid-range AoE damaging tool that slows all enemies hit for a very long time, and it can hold in place for up to 4 seconds while being detonated remotely. It should be noted that its cooldown begins after throwing, so with enough ability haste and delay in between recasts, you can have a barrel on the field at all times. Barrel Roll is excellent at harassing lane opponents, zoning them off minion waves, and even has a disengage tool thanks to the massive slow even when uncharged. The damage is no slouch either. Secondly, Gragas is the only Vanguard in the game with neutral sustain. We do have other healing tanks like Nunu, Zac, and Maokai, but all of them have to interact with something to get their heals off, be it minions or champions. Even while Gragas is zoned off from the wave, any of his abilities can periodically heal him for a portion of his max health. Provided he has the mana to afford it, he can heal from 1 HP all the way to full if given enough time. If push comes to shove, Gragas doesn't have to interact with his opponent. He can spend the entirety of laning phase tossing Qs over and over while disengaging the moment you try to attack him. Having a strong neutral game isn't necessarily unhealthy for a champion, it's when you compound that with strong disruption or self-peel that it becomes an issue. For someone like Xerath, if you manage to close the gap on him, he crumbles to pieces as he lacks a reliable way to escape pressure since shocking orb stuns for a shorter period of time at close range. If you try to engage on Gragas, he could stun you with Body Slam, explode a barrel in your face, and then use Phase Rush to run his big booty away from danger. And if by some chance you're still able to chase him down, Explosive Cask is another get-off-me tool. Vanguards are supposed to be very high commitment champions. They have strong engages in exchange for having bad neutral and disengage. Gragas has incredible engage without sacrificing either, making him ironically a very consistent champion on paper. Aware of this, Riot has been very hesitant about raising his base numbers, instead choosing to up his AP ratios. In fact, his base numbers haven't really changed since 2014, and if you remember, damage has been steadily rising across the board, especially for tanks. These days you'll often see Gragas players running AP bruiser builds. That's only because full tank Gragas just doesn't really do enough anymore. Patch 8.7 oversaw Barrel Roll and Drunken Rage gaining huge increases in AP scaling. And just remember, Barrel Roll's AP ratio is the base scaling, not factoring in the 1.5 times multiplier. Then in patch 10.15, Drunken Rage's AP damage increased again, as well as Explosive Cask. Then in 11.19, Drunken Rage once again received more AP ratio, bringing it to a grand total of 70% compared to a mere 30% several years ago. More than doubled. Barrel Roll also got more AP just recently in version 12.11. Over time, there were more incentives to play AP Gragas over full tank, since the latter option received almost no tune-ups besides universal changes like the durability update. Now, why is this a bad thing? The answer, Gragas is an AP bruiser with very low persistent damage and almost no base power, two things that AP bruisers really depend on. Barrel Roll's only scaling metric is ability power, Drunken Rage, ability power, Body Slam, ability power, and Explosive Cask, once again, ability power. And for all of them aside from Drunken Rage, the only thing ability power does is increase their damage. He gets no benefit from building health, armor, or magic resist aside from Happy Hour healing for a little more, but that's not enough to constitute tank scaling. To elaborate, let's look at Mordekaiser, another AP bruiser. For one, he gets a lot more free stuff. Darkness Rise is one of the best forms of persistent damage you can ask for. First, it adds a 40% AP ratio to his auto attacks, letting him deal good damage through autos alone, and then it creates a damaging aura for up to 5% max health and base damage per second, which adds up, especially in the late game. Over to his E, Mordekaiser gets 15% free magic penetration. This is mostly to offset the low AP ratios in his kit. Then we have Indestructible, storing up to 30% of his maximum health as a shield. In general, Mordekaiser scales better both in damage and durability thanks to more generous parameters, but he needs them to be effective. Tanks live and die by base numbers. They need that free stuff such as converting defense into offense or max health damage, otherwise they can't function independently. Likewise, AP bruisers also live and die by base numbers. Since they don't have the same extensive item selection as their physical damage counterparts, their innate attributes and scaling have to be overtuned to make up for it. Stuff like the 40% AP ratio on Mordekaiser's autos, overly inflated AP scaling on the likes of Rumble or Sylas. Gragas is being balanced in the direction of an AP bruiser, but he doesn't have the same privileges as other AP bruisers. Mordekaiser can go Riftmaker, Demonic Embrace, and Rylai's yet still feel just as resilient as a full-fledged tank. Silas can go low ability power items like Everfrost and Zanya's while dealing the same kind of burst damage as the Lux with Ludens and Deathcap. Full tank Gragas is only a fraction of the resilience of the likes of Sion, Zac, and Ornn since he has no tank-centric scaling. And AP Bruiser doesn't have the same pressure as Mordekaiser and Silas. Oh, make no mistake, Gragas deals a hefty amount of damage, but not only is it not the right kind of damage, it's also really hard to land that damage, leading us to his next issue. Messing up on Gragas in any way can be extremely punishing. Aside from Drunken Rage, all of his damage can whiff in some way. Barrel Roll comes out rather slow and is positionally dependent, making it easy to sidestep. Body Slam has one of the slowest dash speeds in the game and stops on the first target struck, making it hard to use in minion waves, and Explosive Cask is one of the game's few abilities that can actually hurt your teammates due to serving as disbursement crowd control. Overall, he's less reliable against high mobility or high tempo champions, which nowadays is everyone. In theory, landing all of his abilities can be devastating for any opponent. Combine a max fermented barrel roll with Drunken Rage, Body Slam, and Explosive Cask, you're staring down 330% AP in just AP scaling alone. 500 AP Gragas can one-shot entire teams, in theory. In practice, Gragas is notoriously inconsistent. While all of his abilities can hit multiple enemies, all of them are easy to kite out or sidestep. Prior to version 6.17, Explosive Cast used to explode instantly when at point blank, making engages a lot easier for him. Now with half a second, no matter up close or afar, it's not as effective as it used to be. Fortunately, Gragas has surprisingly low cooldowns, especially with full CDR build, so you don't have to wait for very long to use your stuff again, but it doesn't alleviate just how slow and inconsistent those moves are. On that note, everything Gragas does is just slow, making him feel clunky and uncomfortable to play at times. In an era where everything happens almost instantly, every champion's abilities come out immediately or at the very least gets faster over time, Gragas didn't receive those same updates. For example, Body Slam has a fixed speed of 900. Under certain conditions, he can run faster than his actual dash. Most dash speeds hover around the 12 to 1500 mark so as to always be faster than the highest movement speed that is feasibly obtainable. Anything under that tends to have a base number plus the champion's movement speed. A good example would be Shen's Taunt. Shadow Dash has a base speed of 800, even lower than a Body Slam, but it scales based on his movement speed. So if he's running at 600 or something, then the dash travels at 1400 movement speed. Make sense? Moreover, Drunken Rage is about a 1 second delay where all other empowered auto attacks happen instantly. Mind you, he gains damage reduction for the channel and for a little after, but that small delay can feel jarring for your momentum. Finally, Barrel Roll has a missile speed of only 1000, one of the slowest projectiles in the game. Also, if you want the maximum damage, it needs to sit in place for at least 2 seconds, and we just went over the Explosive Cast delay. From a thematic standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. He's a big guy, not exactly going to take first place in a 100-meter dash anytime soon. In game, it's hard to get a handle on. You have other AP champions like Diana and Silas with lightning quick execution, as well as other tanks who can engage a lot faster like Malphite, and all of them are much easier to play. That brings us to our final point. Gragas has a steeper learning curve than his peers while not yielding the same benefits from mastering him that you would see on other high skill floor champions. Or rather, he used to back in the days when the roster was more linear, not so much against a lineup of 200 years. An easy solution to that would be to amp his numbers up to make them more satisfying to play, right? Normally yes, but as I explained throughout the video, you can't give someone like Gragas anything more than what he has now. If you were to give him the same free stuff as other AP bruisers, he would be running people down in top, jungle, mid, even support. If you gave him the same natural durability as other tanks, that would only embolden players to go full AP on him even more. To make matters worse for him, Gragas is a victim of professional play, as in, whenever he's meta, LCS, LEC, LCK, LPL, etc. abuse the living daylights out of him until he gets nerfed again. With that in mind, solo queue players don't want to main him for being either underpowered or permabanned, no in between. It's a shame really, despite being an older champion, Gragas has an amazing design. Each of his abilities were constructed humorously yet geniusly around his whole backstory of being a booze-loving party guy, and though his kit has withstood the test of time from a design standpoint, it's in dire need of modern touch-ups, but can't receive them without setting off the balance alarm. That being said, I feel like Riot is trying too hard to make him an AP champion when his kit makes a lot more sense as a tank, at least personally speaking. His damage is mostly dealt through short trades, not exactly all-ins like Mordekaiser or one-shot bursts like Silas. I think an easy quality of life change they can give to him would be a bonus health ratio on his body slam like the one Shen has, though maybe Gragas may disagree with me. So if you do, let me know if you think AP Gragas is conceptually better than tank. For all I know, this direction might actually be the right one for him. Okay, so that's it for today. Let me know your thoughts on Gragas in the comments down below, alongside your choice on the aforementioned question regarding whether AP or tank Gragas is better. Aside from that, if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you left a like and subscribed. Consider following me on Twitter, joining my Discord server, and checking out my other Why No One Plays episodes after this one. But for now, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.